Hello everyone, today we're reviewing the Anbernic RG477M, a retro handheld console with an aluminum alloy CNC body. It features a custom 4.7-inch LTPS screen by Anbernic, supporting up to 120Hz refresh rate at 1280 by 960 resolution. We've previously seen this screen on their RG slide, so this screen is specifically designed for retro gaming. The RG slide features the Tiger T820, whereas this RG477M runs on the Dimensity 8300. We previously tried out this very processor several months back on the RG557 and encountered issues where some emulators had less than ideal driver compatibility with Dimensity, making them less enjoyable to use. But several months have now passed, and as you saw initially, emulators are progressively adding support for Dimensity. So today we'll discuss this retro handheld console, focusing on its gaming performance. I'm using Gaishi Game PC emulator version 4.1.5, which supports most Dimensity chips and displays the game screen in a 16:9 aspect ratio. The emulator automatically moves the picture to the top, leaving the bottom empty. Sleeping Dogs is a relatively old AAA title. Here, at medium-low settings and 720p, the frame rate is around 40. The overall smoothness and fluidity of the gaming experience are quite commendable. The Dimensity 8300 scores around 1.4 million. In terms of performance, it has no problem playing some older AAA games, it just depends on the emulator's optimization. For some games, the frame rate is just not good no matter what. Like this Tomb Raider 9, the overall frame rate is around 20 FPS. It is, however, still barely playable. After a few adjustments, there are no longer any texture errors. From the beginning until now, I haven't experienced any crashes either. However, during scene loading, the frame rate experiences noticeable and significant fluctuations. I can't believe it, Anbernic's machine can finally play Grand Theft Auto V. The frame rate isn't high, but you have to remember our lifelong nemesis has always been PlayStation Portable's God of War, and now we've evolved to Grand Theft Auto V. The pace of gaming evolution is so fast it's hard to keep up. I'm still not quite used to it. Even older AAA titles can be shown in full screen with a 4:3 aspect ratio. I'll provide more gameplay demonstrations in part 2 for your reference. The DC emulator has only just begun to be optimized for Dimensity, so there's still ample room for adjustments. For now, we'll conclude our tinkering here. Of course, I also tinkered with the NS emulator, but it has a lot more problems. You can only play some games with built-in drivers. Larger games crash very easily. To mess with this, you need to have several versions of the emulator ready, which I think is really unnecessary. Just play the small games that work and consider it a bonus. Oh, and for Tears of the Kingdom, the frame rate on the Sky Islands isn't high and there's some stuttering. After playing some NS games for a while, let's test its temperature. Metal conducts heat more readily than plastic. Of course, the heat mainly concentrates on the screen, but the temperature management on the back is also quite decent. The areas where you hold it are generally fine. It's just that under heavy usage the frame feels a little warm to the touch. I also ran tests on the PS3 emulator. This emulator hasn't improved much. We won't consider the highly demanding ones. It can run smaller games. God of War likely has driver issues, causing minor audio crackling. The games we've tested so far are all quite demanding and mostly in 16:9, which doesn't really show off the advantage of this screen's 4:3 ratio for retro platforms, but for older home consoles like the PS2, NGC, and DC, this screen's display is excellent. Many other platforms can also achieve point-to-point display. Here I'm using the Ether SX2 emulator to run Ratchet & Clank. This game is currently running at 4 times the native resolution. It's super smooth. You don't actually need to set the resolution that high. 2x resolution already maxes out the screen, and it lowers power consumption, giving you more battery life. Let me show you a few other platforms. I want to primarily highlight how these 4:3 aspect ratio games display in full screen. For GBA games, this screen can do 5x point-to-point display. It also has a preset overlay for us, and the display effect is quite nice. Besides the silver model, a bronze color option is available. Configurations are high or low. 8 plus 128 GB for low spec, 12 plus 256 GB for high spec. For PS2 retro gaming, 8 GB and 12 GB show no difference. For more storage and win rate NS tinkering, 12 plus 256 GB is recommended. The 12 GB of RAM can also handle some of today's popular large mobile games. Based on my 2 days of testing, from my personal perspective, I've divided these devices' games into 3 categories: win rate, NS, and retro games. For retro games, I can give it a very high score. If retro games are your main focus, this machine is definitely worth considering. The 4.7-inch 960p screen, paired with the Dimensity 8300, is pretty much perfect for handling classic retro games. However, for those aiming to dabble in PC or NS games, its performance might not be ideal. Nevertheless, plenty of older games are still playable, and there's a lot of enjoyment to be found in experimenting with them. I'll continue creating videos to share more tips with you all. Soft. On the software side, its built-in RG front-end is also simple and user-friendly, and it supports changing to other front-ends. There are also 2 performance modes, but it's worth mentioning that the fan is quite noisy in full-speed mode. You can hear it for yourselves. Switching to light mode significantly improves things. The controller layout can be toggled between Xbox and Nintendo. And of course, there's the RGB lighting, a personal favorite, with various modes. I use the chasing light effect but find it a bit too bright, almost like light pollution. The screen's refresh rate can be freely adjusted between 120, 90, and 60 Hz. Some people think that 120 Hz is useless on a retro gaming handheld, but we already discussed this with the last RG slate. Black frame insertion can improve motion clarity, and high refresh rates are better for mobile games and streaming, though 60 Hz is definitely more power efficient. Anbernic's Android devices now all come with Anbernic AI, which is helpful for playing games that haven't been translated. Is helpful. Regarding the hardware, I personally really appreciate the tactile feel of its conductive rubber pads. The joystick feel to me is average. The shoulder buttons use micro switches side by side. I'm fine with it, still usable. The device's layout features the D-pad above the joystick. Since the joystick and D-pad are quite close and symmetrically arranged, I find they can occasionally hinder quick actions, such as performing special moves. However, this situation can be avoided with a minor adjustment. The console itself weighs 355 grams. Size comparison with Switch Lite. The RG477M is slightly thicker. Width isn't too different. Compared to Cobra 20, it's thinner than Cobra XX. Comparing it to a competitor's, note the screen ratios: 4.5 inches at 3:2 and 4.7 inches at 4:3. Both are displaying in a 4:3 aspect ratio. Let's compare the thickness of these two small powerhouses. Alright friends, I haven't had this RG477M for a very long time, but I'll definitely keep playing around with it. I really hope that my tests today have provided some helpful insights for those of you who are still on the fence about getting one. This video comes to an end right here. Thank you all so much for watching.